Appreciate that. Ahmed, in regards to identity, we see that youth are facing an identity crisis. In Jordan, it's clear that where you are from, in other words, the geographical factor, is used as an identifier. What was the context that led to this division? And why does it seem that we still don't know what it takes to be a real Jordanian?
So, this is a very difficult question. Thank you for asking. Yeah. So I'm just going to talk from my personal experience. Living abroad most of my life and being here for 5 years right now. There was this type of shock that I saw coming in, which is, again, it's the issue of how you identify yourself. I was asked some very odd questions that I've never been asked before. Where are you from? Is one question. So I'm like, I'm from Jordan. It's like, no, where are you from? So there's this other identifier, the real where. And then I came to realize that it had some significance here between us as youth and obviously as Jordanians. The implication that if you are from a certain region, then you have a certain type of support within people from that same region. So there's this power that exists in this identity that you can identify with. Whether you're from the north, from the south, from city A, city B, from east of the river, west of the river, there is a certain power associated with that. And if there is power associated with something, then it makes sense to try and belong to at least one of these identities. Because at the end of the day, when you step back and you look at it, I have a number of, let's call them tribes, for example. Okay, you look at people, you identify them through tribes. And this is the spectrum where they interact. This is where they can position themselves in society. Now, again, as an outsider looking in, that was very odd, very weird, because living abroad, it was, as Mr. Samir said very eloquently, it's all about yourself. So the idea is that it's not self-determination so much as you can be whatever you want to be to an extent. Okay, whereas when you come to Jordan, and I guess what happens in Jordan is an example of what happens in the region on a broader scale. It is, we are still trying to figure out who we are in this interconnected world. We're looking, we can see everyone everywhere in the world across, all continents. We see what youth are doing in the US, what they're doing in Europe, what they're doing in Australia. And then we look at our youth, look at our conditions. And there's the sense that our current identity as, let's say, Jordanians, is not satisfying our social needs, our emotional needs, our political needs. So that could be an alternative reason why we continue to seek a different identity that can give us some sort of meaning. I hope I sort of answered that.
Very well, yes, very well, thank you. I'll take it back to Saad if I can. The rise of ISIS, or ISIL, or simply IS, the Islamic State, between quotations, took the world by surprise last year. And what was even more interesting was the diversity among the youth that traveled across the world to join such an extreme group that's inhumane and bloody and violent. In your opinion, Saad, what makes ISIS, with this extreme ideology, so attractive to the youth?
Well, Amir, can I comment on others? I have to.
Yes.
Okay. Because I cannot leave that important comments.
Maybe we should share this mic. It seems to be the best one.
Yeah. There is wasta with Amir here. Okay. Hello. What's the difference between how youth see themselves in our countries and others? I can say that sometimes in our region they don't see themselves.
Exactly.
I mean, the individualism is a crime. It's connected with selfishness or with extreme freedom, I'm seeing here. I believe the key word about individualism is an important one to understand how youth and even adults see each other. The minute you introduce yourself to somebody, especially in Jordan, and I'll come to talk about Jordan, everybody will put you on the screen, where you are from. And then he will start understand you, communicate with you according to this result. You are from West, North, West, whatever, Christian, Muslim. But this is not the core of our society. If we look to each other, Jordan has its own connection. Jordan as a country, as people, is a prime example of accepting the others from the start of the history of modern Jordan. Why we are hiding this? Jordanians, tribal Jordanians, took their role in supporting the concept of the Arab world, over the Arab Revolution. So sometimes I feel that we are not objectives to come to Jordan when it comes to these things. We are tribal. Yes, we are. There is tribes. We cannot. If somebody from a tribe, from Zobi, I know that. We know as Jordanians who maybe, I know. I mean, this is not a wrong thing. What is wrong is to act and to consider this as a privilege, to give you privileges against the law. This is important. The other one about Jordan, again, that always we don't have a narrative. Jordan, if we want to be objectives, goes under process. We are always under a lot of issues, geographical, from political, from economic. I believe we have a very rich history in Jordan, and we need to sort of unify the narrative of Jordanians, which is, in my opinion, accepting the others was the main factor in the history of this country. And you know, as Jordanians, you don't need me to give you examples. As for ISIS, Islamic State is it's an aggression in itself. We cannot call these people Islamic State. And I believe that we should have laws and regulations to prevent media to call them this way. Because this is affecting our people, our religion, our understanding of the conflict. But I'm a little bit surprised with the surprise of everybody of ISIS. What ISIS did that Taliban didn't do. And thanks for the Americans to create Taliban. Right? So the main point that these people had the opportunity that they never dreamed of, which is the collapse of so-called some countries and the ideology. You know, if you go to history, ideology, religious ideology would attract. It has nothing to do with Islam. There is groups, Christian groups, who imprisoned themselves with a leader in a camp, and he ordered them to kill themselves. I don't remember the names, but I know about.
Waco, Texas.
Yes.
Waco, Texas.
Thank you for that. So it has nothing to do with the religion. It has to do with a youth, young man, young woman, want to realize and understand and crystallize his character. He wants acceptance from the society. This kind of ideologies and the groups give him this opportunity. And don't forget about the American dollars. If you pay a young man from Texas $1,500 a day, this is very attractive and very, very attractive to come. It's not always about the religion, the religious motivation and coming to create the state. Money talks, guys. And we need to realize this issue about when we are analyzing these movements. What I want to say that always we are connecting this with the Islam, and that Islam is motivating and promoting violence. In my opinion, it has part of the truth in the sense of what kind of Islam they promote, not the real Islam. But the main issue has so much to do with youth trying to find their identity, and this is their right. You remember, when you are young, you want to be in a sport club, you want to be, you put a ring, you want to be whatever you want. I have the wish to put a ring, I cannot put it in Jordan. It's difficult. So, I mean, the whole issue has nothing in you except of that we are trying to understand it as if it is coming from Islam. Any environment that you introduce to the youth, women, dollars, and ideology, you got them. So what you do, you introduce culture, openness, sport, art, culture. Nothing surprises me about people coming to these. It happened with Judaism, it happened with, and I want to remind with King Abdullah's understanding of this and saying that this is not unique for Islam. These kind of groups, actually they are with all religions, and we have very prime examples. Why I'm saying that? Just for the sake of not trying to solve it at the expense of what I hear now. We have to have a new Islam, we have to have a new understanding of Islam, we have to introduce a new training on understanding religion. This is not the issue, guys. If I am a religious man, you cannot change me. What you need to understand that you don't want to give the reasons for a young man to come to this region to kill, which has nothing to do with any religion. Thank you.
Interesting point, and I actually wanted to ask you a follow-up question about the sense of belonging, because you mentioned that they go there for the sense of belonging. I was going to ask if we could potentially provide something to give them a different sense of belonging, but you naturally answered it within itself, and you said we need to introduce something new. And new, I should put it between quotations. We should introduce culture back into our society. We should introduce sports. We should introduce the academic criteria of this. I think that's a very important thing that we're lacking. As a moderator, I'm not supposed to give my opinion, yet that's something I do want to stress on. We need to go back and introduce these ethics and civilized means of interaction. Please, yes.
I'd like to start with academia, with our schooling, because I think there are two philosophies of what you do in schools. One philosophy is you need to make sure that the young kids in school are trained to be part of society, a seamless part of society, look like each other, think like everybody else, fit exactly in society, and schools can do that. 12 years and then in the university to make sure that you are identical. And that's where you start to lose your individual identity, so you're starting to think, talk, express yourself, look, dress like everybody else. The other philosophy is to emphasize that you are distinct in your making, in your look, in your thinking from everybody else. You need to live in peace with others. You need to respect others, but you are an individual with your independent thinking. This starts very, very early. This starts in kindergarten and then continues. So if you can't come at a very late stage and say, why aren't these youth thinking independently for themselves? Because it's a bit too late. You have inculcated them into becoming parts of a bigger machine that operate that machine. Youth by nature, and that's what's so great. That's why nations value youth, is they want to be empowered to do something. If the state doesn't empower the youth in terms of their rights, their responsibility, their participation, their role, somebody will empower them. If it's not the state as citizens, it will be your religious leader or your tribal leader or your family, your cousin, your etc., you will be, or your gangster. Many countries in the world that are not democratic have gangs, and are suffering from all sorts of social, economic. We have a societal problem, I think, much more than a religious problem. It's a societal, and I don't mean it's just it has to do with the political economy of our countries, the way the states decide to empower their citizens. If you don't empower citizens to be full practicing citizens who can participate in local elections, participate in school elections to create school councils, and then learn through that experience. They will make mistakes. They will take on too much power. Then they will. This is the process by which you get people who are fully engaged in their society. Short of that, you are vulnerable. You are vulnerable to identities. You are vulnerable to violent interpretations of everything, of Islam, of what a tribe is. A tribe is mostly about finding ways to resolve problems with other tribes when that happens. It's not an instrument of violence. The norms of tribal norms are mostly about how you resolve conflict, if you look at the norms. But all of this can be turned around. We're all now, of course, living the story of Charlie Hebdo and what have you. It's very interesting that Quran makes references to scenarios of the non-believers making fun and ridiculing the Prophet and Islam. In Quran, there are, in Surah An-Nisa, first it refers to the Prophet as being saddened when he hears a criticism of the verses or the Quran or God. Saddened, not angered. And it says, you know, you are saddened by that, and the Quran tries to sort of uplift his spirits because he is sad, not angered, which is a very important distinction. And then there is a verse in Surah An-Nisa that says, if you are sitting in a crowd and that crowd is ridiculing the Quran, leave the crowd until they change the topic and then join that crowd again. You know, so this is the text which we are referring to, as opposed to if you hear somebody ridiculing Islam, kill them. And I wish to see a reference anywhere in the text that now, obviously, as Saad was saying, in any religion, you can find something to build a violent culture or a peaceful culture around. The way for us to build a civic society, I think, rests with the state. It rests with the state in building the rules for a democratic society, representative, the election law, and then reflecting that in our education system and how we involve our children in the civic life, in cleaning up the neighborhood, in making small decisions that over time become bigger decisions.